Liz, thank you. And I'm joined by the Federal Minister for Urban Infrastructure and leading New South Wales Liberal, Paul Fletcher. Thank you for your time.
Pleased to be with you.
Let me ask you firstly, did you see this coming, Mike Baird's resignation today?
Look, any development like this is always a surprise, but I think as Mike explained it in his press conference and his media statement this morning, on the one hand, he's really achieved an extraordinary amount in his time as a politician from coming into the New South Wales Parliament in March 2007, all the work as Treasurer and then as Premier. As he also explained, some significant family health challenges that he wants to have more time to devote to, and a feeling that this was really the right time. So, look,
it is unusual though, isn't it? Can you see people looking at this saying, well, he's only Premier 3 years. You know, a lot of people work their whole lives to get to that job and rarely give it up so quickly. You're right in pointing to the family issues, though. Do you think that was the main factor here? Would you have liked to have seen him, without those issues, have been able to stay for longer?
Look, I think that's really a question I'll leave to Mike to say more about if he chooses to. What I would say is, you judge people's effectiveness not just by tenure, but by what they get done. And what he's achieved has really been quite extraordinary. If I just talk about the infrastructure space, and as Federal Minister for Urban Infrastructure, obviously I have a bit of a chance to work closely with the New South Wales Government, the Baird Government, on the extraordinary infrastructure program that's occurring in New South Wales. West Connects, for example, this transformational $16.8 billion project. North Connects, which is going to connect the M2 and the M1 at Wahroonga and Pennant Hills. The Sydney Metro, a new rail connection will run from Rouse Hill down through Chatswood under the harbour. The new Sydney West Metro.
Okay,
so these are remarkable achievements, and my point is that Mike Baird has really been instrumental in delivering them and in making the case to the people of New South Wales before the 2015 election as to why the poles and wires transaction should occur.
So this is what I want to ask you about. He managed to get that reform at least through the sale of the poles and wires, where his predecessors had tried and failed over many years here in New South Wales. In an era where reform is said to be so difficult to do, it is difficult to do. How did he do it?
You're right. It is a very impressive example of making the case to the people of New South Wales as to why a Baird government, if re-elected in 2015, would enter into a transaction in relation to the electricity poles and wires to realise capital, to withdraw capital from those assets and redeploy them into other assets, vitally needed transport infrastructure.
But as you say, it's making the case of something that's been unpopular for so long. How does that contrast with the Turnbull government, noting that Mike Baird himself lists as his greatest regret not being able to achieve that tax reform, the GST increase with offsetting income tax cuts? He championed it more than any other Liberal, really.
Look, I think an important feature of Mike Baird's success as Shadow Treasurer, as Treasurer and as Premier has been a commitment to sound financial management. And look at the extraordinary position that the New South Wales balance sheet is now in, thanks to his work and the work of Gladys Berejiklian as Treasurer, but also the nexus, the connection between that and delivering outcomes for the people who are there to elect.
How come he was able to do reform when Malcolm Turnbull is not on that scale?
Well, I reject the proposition that the Turnbull government is not a reforming government. It very much is. What I would say, though, is that we're at a position where we're looking at...
Not on that scale. When we talk about tax reform, you know, we're not seeing anything like that.
Look, you can point to issues like superannuation, where we've made some changes that are important so that superannuation continues to be effective. We're making a range of changes across a whole range of areas. But if we look at why Mike Baird, I think, has been so successful, I think it's because of sound economics, sound financial management, and then making the cases to the benefits that can be delivered. And of course, from a state government perspective, you know, one of the things you're charged with is delivering infrastructure. It's been really
and I want to come back to the Badgerys Creek Airport, a particular piece of infrastructure that he's pushed that you're involved in as well. But just on Mike Baird himself, he has been a genuine liberal on some of those reforms, the electricity sale, championing tax reform and so on. Where he ran into political difficulty was on more social areas, whether that was the ban on the greyhounds, the liquor licensing laws in Sydney and so on. How would you describe Mike Baird in terms of where he sits in ideology in terms of the Liberal Party? What sort of a liberal has he been?
Look, I'd say he's a liberal who, number one, believes in sound economic and financial management. But number two, he believes in being clear about what he stands for, as he did in the 2015 election, where he said to the New South Wales people, here's the plan, here's what we're going to do, here's the transaction, here's what we're going to use.
But he didn't say do things like ban the greyhound racing industry. And as an example, that did get him into a lot of political trouble.
If we take, for example, the issue you mentioned in terms of licensing laws, and that's been an issue where he's taken a clear position. And yes, it's been an issue where there have been people on both sides. That's the nature of government.
Some of these things are more, the liquor licensing laws, the nanny state approach, as it's been called. You would expect more from not so much Labor, but even the Greens. I mean, how does that fit with Liberal Party ideology?
Mike is a core Liberal. He's Liberal through and through. And what he's delivered on is an agenda of sensible economic management and using that to deliver outcomes for the people he's there to represent. And things like increased public safety on the streets, I mean, those are absolutely core Liberal values, but so is making transformational infrastructure investments. The projects which the New South Wales government, in many cases with support from the Commonwealth government, has been able to fund, will transform Sydney, they will transform New South Wales, and they will deliver benefits for generations to come.
Well, one of the biggest
Mike Baird has really delivered, in many ways, the intellectual leadership, certainly at state level, the energy and the vision to do that.
And will Gladys Berejiklian make a good successor?
Look, the choice of who succeeds Mike Baird is a matter for the New South Wales Liberal Party room. I'm not going to be giving them any advice other than to say there's obviously a lot of, in the human resources jargon, a lot of good bench strength in the New South Wales Parliamentary Liberal Party. That's a thing to celebrate. Mike Baird has been a successful, very successful Premier. The Baird government has been a successful government. The O'Farrell government was a successful government. I'm confident the next state Liberal government will also be a successful
Let me ask you just finally about one of the biggest infrastructure projects on the books, at least in Sydney and certainly for Australia, the second Sydney airport at Badgerys Creek. Mike Baird has probably been the first Premier to really push that in New South Wales, and then the Abbott, now Turnbull governments federally as well. We did see yesterday, though, one of the ratings agencies, Standard & Poor's, make it clear after looking at the case that the Sydney Airports Corporation that owns Sydney Airport, it would be wrong to actually develop Badgerys Creek. They have the first option to do so, but Standard & Poor's saying they'd have a higher rating from them if they didn't.
Look, 2 points. Certainly the Baird government has cooperated very effectively with the federal coalition in relation to Western Sydney Airport. For example, the $3.6 billion Western Sydney infrastructure plan, which is ground transport connections such as the new M12 that will run from the M7 to the airport.
But who's going to build the airport?
Well, the Sydney Airport Corporation has a right of first refusal. They have until mid-May to decide whether they're going to take that up. If they take up the right of first refusal, they will build, no ifs, no buts. If they choose not to, then the Commonwealth Government is free to build it itself or to go to another private sector player on the same terms as we've offered Sydney Airport Corporation in what's called the Notice of Intention, which was issued to them just before Christmas.
So the federal government would consider building it with taxpayers' money if Sydney Airport says no?
Oh, look, we've certainly made clear that that is one of the options that's available to us, absolutely.
Is there any possibility of the federal government actually providing more incentive for Sydney Airport Corporation to do it?
Look, we've been clear in what we've said in relation to the Notice of Intention, which has been issued to Sydney Airport Corporation. That's about 1,000 pages of contractual documentation following
But would you sweeten the deal? Would you sweeten the deal?
We've had comprehensive consultation with Sydney Airport Corporation. The Notice of Intention is now there for Sydney Airport
So
Corporation
you
to
won't go
consider.
beyond that. You won't go beyond what's on the table.
It's a matter for Sydney Airport Corporation to consider whether it wants to accept the terms that have been put to it or not. That's its choice.
You won't make it a more generous deal.
If it takes up the notice of intention, then it will build. If
But
not,
I'm just
then
saying, would you improve that offer?
we've made our offer to
That's it.
Sydney Airport Corporation. It's now a matter for them to consider the terms of the notice of intention, and they have until mid-May to do so.
Paul Fletcher, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Good to talk to you.
Thanks, David.